What I'm going to show you now quickly is something that's really useful. Before we do that, let's do a little bit of tidying up, because we had this, this and this, which is for the dragon tattoo, and if you remember I said that should be green. So, and if I hold down the shift key and I select all three of those and then hit Command G, it will make a new group and we'll call that tattoo, like that, and we'll also make that green. So we know that's all the tattoo. You twirl that down, they're all inside there. You can turn them off individually, but you can turn the whole group off. So let's just leave that off for now. Now, let's turn our attention a little bit down here to the background. Now, in the background of the photo, you can see there's a crowd of people. You can't see it on this side, obviously, because of the water damage, so that's a problem that we need to fix. And I am going to do a new background on here for the poster version, but I like the idea of keeping these people in the background. And it looks like they're all looking this way. There's photographers obviously here. This guy's taking a shot here, and there are some trees in the background, which would, I imagine, carry over to this side here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to an amazing website, which is called unsplash.com. And what's great about this is if you click on the license and you want to stop and pause this and read it, or just go to the site yourself, you can use these images absolutely free. All you need to do is give the photographers a credit in the video, which we are going to absolutely do every time we use something like that. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type Kung Fu, and I've tried this earlier, so I know there's the picture, and I like this picture here, and then you can download it here. So let's just jump back into Photoshop, and if we hold Command and Tab, we can actually tab through things that are open. That's our recording software, that's the Finder, there's Chrome, and here's Photoshop. We just let that go and it jumps back into here. So let's open the photo. Here it is. This photo is by Tao Lei Huang. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And I quite like the idea of having some people doing, moves in the background like that, and it's a nice perspective shot, and it's also very low to the ground, which the perspective in this is quite low. If you look at it and looking up at Colin actually, and at eye level down here with these guys in the background. So before we drag it in, what we're going to do first of all is Command 0, fit in window. Actually, we'll zoom out a wee bit more. We'll scroll down here. We'll make a new layer by clicking on this, and we're going to call it background. And then we're going to drag Colin up above that, and we're going to make sure Colin has his name correct on that layer. Then select the background, we're going to hit Command and Delete, and that will fill it with white. If I turn Colin off there, you'll see the background there. And then what we're going to do is grab the crop tool, and we're just going to give ourselves a little bit more space, because when I come to finish this poster properly, we need a little bit more room at the bottom. So let's just do that. We'll click OK. And then what we'll do is, once the crop tool's done its thing, we'll go back to the background and hit Command Delete again, and that's going to fill all that area like that. Now we are going to delete all this down here, so we'll do that in a second very quickly. So what we'll do now is we'll go to Tao's photo, and then all we have to do is hold. Now we can drag these tabs along as well to move these closer to each other like this. So that is now next to this tab here, which is our active tab. And then all you have to do is select the background layer, which is the image, drag it over to this tab, and that'll activate it. And this is the background from that tab, and we just drop it, and it's dropped that photo in. So let's drag it up here. Let's put it up to the right to the very top. And we're going to call this, let's call it Kung Fu background, may as well, because that's what we've searched for. Let's select the move tool. Let's just zoom in a little. We'll drag this down here. Now, if we look at the perspective of this image, this guy looks like quite possibly like it's almost the same size in perspective, maybe a little bit larger, but that's fine because I want him to be, he'll be in front of these anyway. In fact, to be quite honest, we could probably make it slightly larger. So Command T, which is transform. And what's great in Photoshop is when you used to drag this, you used to have to hold the shift key down. Well, now what they've done with 2020, and I think maybe even the one before that, is by default now, the shift key is in Pro, so it stays constrained. And if you want it to be unconstrained, you have to hold the shift key, which is weird really, because it's totally the opposite to how it used to work. but that's what you have to do there. So we'll just drag it and make it maybe slightly larger, not too much, but I just want them slightly closer to Colin than they are than the people in the background. And then we're just going to move this over here a second, like this. Now, where would their feet be? Let's work that out. Let's just click OK for that. And then what we'll do is we'll move this across here. And then if these guys were this guy is standing in the background, if we select on the rulers and we drag down a guide, then surely his feet are probably going to be around about there, yeah? Which is pretty close to where the ground plane is on this, which is why I like this shot, because I think the perspective was excellent. I found this image straight away on that website. So let's drag this back over to here, like this. And what we're going to do now is we're going to double click on our Kung Fu background. This brings up the layer style. And what we want to do is we want to make this the same color as this image here. Now I'm going to be using this throughout the image to change the color of things, so I'll show you how this works. So in styles, we want to select color overlay. Now you can see it's already gone to quite possibly the right color. I'm just going to cancel that a second so I can move this across a little bit. So we'll go back there. We'll click on color overlay, and then what you do is you click blend mode. Will be color. You can choose different modes like overlay and screen and if you chose multiply, look, it would go like that. So if you choose color, then it will literally change the whole color of the image to whatever color you choose here. So we're going to click on that, and that brings up your color picker window. And as soon as we scroll into the image, it turns into that eyedropper tool, which we can click and hold down. We can drag around, and as you can see in that window to the right, it's changing the color. So, and it will also change it here, which is great. So if we just click around until we find something, you know, that's close, maybe like that, and then we click OK, and then we click OK again, and now we've got a similar color to what the background is here. But obviously we need to do two things now. We need to blur this, which we'll do first, and we also need to shift the tonal values to match the tonal values on here, because you can see that the darkest areas of tonal, because they're pushed back into the background, they will be much lighter, yeah? And although this is closer to the foreground, we still want it to try and match the background here. And if I just turn this off a minute and show you this group that I made before, this was a group of people that I made to kind of match this, and I might even use those in the background as well. And I've done that exactly the same way as I'm showing you now. I've got the colour match perfect. You wouldn't even know, would you, look, that wasn't part of that image. If you turn it off, look, it's great, isn't it? So that's basically what we're going to be doing with this one. So let's go back to here, and we go up to the top. We go to filter, and then we go blur, and then we go Gaussian blur. Now, Gaussian blur will already affect, you've got a preview here that you can zoom out and zoom into, look, so you can see how it's going to look. And as soon as you drag it around, it's normal, and when you let it go, that's how it looks. If you turn preview off, it turns the preview off on your main window, but it's good to have that on because you can see it immediately. Now, I've already done this once on the other crowd that I showed you there, so I know it's 14.1, works nicely for that. Looks about the right depth of field focus for that. So, but you can, I'll just show you, if you can drag this slider down, look, and then it will change, not as blurred, nowhere near blurred, ridiculously blurred, right? So let's put 14.1, we can type that in, hit OK. Now, what we have to do is, if we go down here to the bottom of our layers palette, you'll see we have these different layer styles. That one's effects to add a layer style, like we added the color. This is add layer mask. This is create new fill or adjustment layer. And then we've got create a new group, create a new layer, or delete layer. So what we're going to do above Kung Fu background is we've got the color matching pretty good against the crowd background, and we did that with our color overlay. But what we do need to do now we've blurred it is we need to try to see if we can match the tonal values and the values really of the color here, especially in the dark values, to the same depth of field, because the dark areas in here are much darker because it's further forward, and the dark values in here are lighter because it's further back into perspective. So what we need to try and do is match these values to these values because the colour's pretty good. So what we need to do that is we go down here and we click on here to add a new adjustment layer, and what we'll choose is levels, like this, and that will bring this up here. Now originally what you would have to do in Photoshop in the past is you would have to select your layer, just forget this for a second, this adjustment layer, because these didn't used to exist, yeah? And what you would have to do is you would go to your adjustments here, which are now down there, and then you would choose any of these things here like curves, levels, exposure, brightness and contrast. And if I just click on this down here, you'll see that the same things actually for a layer, an adjustment layer, were always available and still are actually under image here, image, adjustments, levels. Because what we're actually going to do is we're going to pull these dark areas down in the midtones to match this. So there's a couple of different ways of doing that. This is for all like the blacks and whites, and this will give us a pretty good effect, yeah, of getting this area here. So it's more or less matching the same here and here. And then this is the midtones in the center. So we could play with that lot if we wanted to make it slightly lighter and darker. And by, I guess, a mixture of both of these things, we'll come up with something that's pretty close to our background. So it looks like this is part of the original photograph, which is what we're trying to achieve, yeah? But if you were to click OK on this, what would happen is it would be incredibly destructive to the artwork or your photograph that's sitting on this layer. So what Adobe did, which is absolutely great, was they came up with these adjustment layers which work like the color overlay and any filters you would apply to a layer, and it's completely non-destructive because you can, like other effects in the layers, just turn it on and off. So this is our levels layer, and as you can see, this looks very similar to our adjustment levels here, yeah? We'll just cancel that. There's no information in there, that's because we've got this layer selected. And then we can do exactly the same thing, but we can do it here. Now, what you do need to be aware of is this little icon here, because at the moment this is pointing down, there's a little down arrow there and it's got a cross through it. Now that means that this adjustment layer will actually affect every single layer sitting below it. And we don't want that, we just want it to affect the Kung Fu background layer, yeah? There may be times when you may need to do that, but in this instance we just want to change the Kung Fu background. And to do that, all we need to do is press this little icon like this, and it'll tell you there, look, this adjustment affects all layers below, and then in brackets, click to clip to layer. So we do that. Now it's got a little arrow pointing down to the layer below it, in this case, which is Kung Fu background, and that means that these adjustment levels and any adjustments that we make will only affect our Kung Fu background, which is our Kung Fu picture, which is exactly what we want, okay? So this area here is exactly the same as what is up here under adjustments, which would be adjustment and levels. And what we're going to do is what I showed you a second ago, and we're just going to play around with this a little bit. We can make that slightly lighter like this. We darken that a wee bit, make that quite a little bit lighter. So that's quite a nice match for the background. The levels look about right, matching this dark color, darkest color here. And I guess if this was slightly further forward in perspective, it would be slightly darker. But for now, just to explain to you how this works, you can see that you can get pretty close. And the great thing is what we're going to do now is on this little bar here, we can go close, because we want to keep as much room as we can for our layer visibility. And what's great about this is because it's on its own layer, which I showed you how to do from down here, we can actually turn that off and turn that on. And what we won't do is we won't damage this layer in any way whatsoever. Because like I told you earlier, if you go up here, you go to adjustment and you go to levels, once you've set that and clicked OK, that is actually set in stone. So if I just quickly do that and turn that off, look, I'll make a copy of this layer by dragging it to there. I'll turn this layer off. I'll very quickly go up to here, adjustments, levels, and you can see there's lots of information on that curve there, on that input level. Let's just change this a wee bit, and then let's scroll this way. Let's assume that's what we want. So yes, that's good. Click OK. Right. That now is fixed to that layer completely. So if we actually went back and wanted to change that and make any adjustments, so we go adjustment now, we go to levels, can you see, look, all this information has disappeared. So it's all broken up into what levels that we've only got left in the image. So it just becomes very destructive. So let's delete that and put this guy back on. Okay, so we've got this adjustment level above here, and what I'm going to do just for quick purposes on here is show you how to collapse that down if ever you want to do that. So you just right click here and then merge clip mask, and that will force that now into this, so it is saved with those settings. But it's good to keep it separate from that because it's non-destructive, like I explained to you earlier. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag that to there, make a copy of that. And the reason we're going to do that is that we want this girl here to be over on this side. But what we don't want is we don't want her facing out of the picture, because for composition purposes, we need to have her facing in. Composition purposes, you should never really have anyone facing out of the image, especially if they're at the edge. So we go Edit and Transform and Flip Horizontal. Boom, now she's facing inwards. So let's take her that way. Hold the Shift key down, drag across that. I keep her constrained to that same area. So she's level with this guy here. And we're just going to drag that down below this one. And we're just going to turn that off 1 second. And then we'll turn our attention back to this. Then what we can do is hit E on the keyboard for our eraser. What we will do is we'll take the opacity down a wee bit just so we can see Colin through there. And the great thing about this image that I found on unsplash.com is it's got trees in it, which is fabulous. Now we don't really want any of the background. We don't need that on this layer. We could have just lasso selected that and deleted it, but I'm just going to do it like this just very quickly. And we're going to put a new ground plane in here. So let's just take that out for a second. So what we do is when we delete some of these trees on the actual Unsplash image, what will be nice is if we just turn that off, look, we can see some of the trees through the image to the background image there, which is great. So let's just take some of this hard edge off the top here and feather that out. And then the same down here, we just want to lose those square edges like that. We could even use a textured brush on the eraser for this, but just for quick purposes, we'll do it like this. Come down here, just remove that edge. Obviously, we're going to tidy all this area up on the back photograph. Let's crank up the opacity there. Let's just delete a little bit more of this, and if we take a little bit of this tree out here, what we will start to see is our photographer chappie in the background there, look, you see? And then we can push back into some of this. And we are going to repair this image, so that's all good. We might keep that tree in there, keep some of these guys in from the background, keep some of these trees. And why not? While we're on this layer, let's scroll down. Let's go to Colin's layer. Let's make this brush a little bigger. Let's hit Control and click, and then we can rotate this brush around. And then let's just delete very quickly some of the edge of this because it's slightly off-putting, isn't it? So let's just get rid of a little bit of that. We're going to fix all this here later. And just to get the hard edge off there so you can see that we'll end up with a nice uniform background. And then, like I said, we've got this other layer up here. Let's just do that very quickly. We can turn that on. Let's take the opacity down slightly. Make sure we're on the correct layer. Let's turn that down so we can see Colin. Make sure we're on eraser, which we are. And then we can take some of hair off behind Colin like this. And then let's just lose a little bit of that ground. And also, before we do that, let's scroll back here. We'll go to Colin. Let's just very quickly take some of this out so you can see what's going on there. We remove this here. Let's do all that like that. And why not just take this out up here as well quickly. In fact, if we hit L, that's lasso. We go around here like this, just for the quickness of showing you. We go around here, like that, let that go. Press delete, deselect that, and then we can see what's going on a little better. This straight edge here, I do believe, actually, is what's left from that image, which it is. So let's select that. Press E for eraser. We'll just get rid of that quickly, so there's no more of his image in the background. And then we'll go back to her image on the left. And all we need to do is just lose that straight edge there from the top of those trees. Make a bit of a vignette feather in there, slightly over those kids, keep her foot in. We are going to add a new ground in there for the finished piece. But really, I wanted to show you just how easy it was to take that great photo that I found from unsplash.com and create the beginnings of what will eventually be our new background. Right, so that's our Kung Fu background. Very quickly done to show you how we can make a new background mixing into the current background using those adjustment layers. And we're going to use another adjustment layer now, because what we need to do is remove, before I start painting all the detail in the jacket, is remove some of this yellow cast and hue in the photograph. And again, we'll use another adjustment layer for that. So we'll come down here, but this time we're going to use a selective color, which is great, because what we want to do is you can choose any color to alter. We're going to choose white, because what we want to do is remove cyan, magenta, and yellow from the whites in this, because although it's obviously originally a black and white CP tone photo, I've got it in RGB, so it's got all the color information in there. Now, so what we do is we just drag this down here like this, look, and you'll see all the cyan is disappearing. That leaves magenta, so we scroll that down there. That just leaves yellow. Pull the yellow down like this, and you can see that all that yellow is moved from that original photo of Colin, which makes it mix a lot nicer into the white background on here. So let's zoom in on this hand and I'll show you how the paths work. Our paths are in here, and we can just pull that out, put this up here like that, and you can drag that back in there. That goes blue and that docks it in there, or you can click it like that and you can pop it back in like that. So let's just pop it out here, and we'll go in this little menu at the top right, we'll go new path, and then we'll call that hand, just so I can show you how to do this. And we'll go P on the keyboard for pen tool. Okay, let's just zoom in a wee bit more. Now the way the pen tool works is click and drag like this. Click and drag, drags a curve like this, and it works the same in Adobe Illustrator as it does in Photoshop, which is really good. And you can actually export a vector path from Photoshop to Illustrator, and from Illustrator you could copy a vector path and paste it into Photoshop, which is really very useful. They work seamlessly together, so I would advise you to get into Illustrator if you can. And we're going to be doing some tutorials on that, vector logos and things, much later on. Right, while I'm drawing this, if I hold the Command key, that turns to an arrow, so I can just twirl those little handles like that. And if I hold down the Alt key and I draw on there, it will start drawing from a new direction, which is quite useful. And we can just drag that in there. And drawing a path, I know I've mentioned it a few times, but it's really similar to cutting a mask when you're airbrushing, because I've been airbrushing since I was about 13 when I picked up my first airbrush, so I am going to talk about airbrushing quite a bit because it does remind me of that. It's very similar, because what paths are used for in Photoshop more than anything is to create masks and paint around, which we're going to be doing on here for the jacket shading. Now if I hold the Alt key now and drag, that'll do a separate path. Hold the space bar, that'll drag my hand over, and as soon as I reach the end there, you'll see that there's a little circle on the pen tool. That means the path is going to be closed. So as soon as it's closed, it will all go like that. And you can see if I hold down the Command key and deselect that and then select it again, you can still go back in and edit these sections if you need to. And you can go in very close, twirl these, look, make any adjustments that you need to. And that will be our paths. Let's just zoom out. We'll dock the paths back in there by dragging it in there till it's blue, and then it's always there if we need it. Let's just zoom out, and let's move on now to painting the section of all this, removing all this water damage and airbrushing in basically all this shading from scratch, so we can end up making this look like it was a brand new photo. So down here we've got karate suit. At the moment that's just filled with white, and then we have a karate suit shading where I've got some very basic shading there. And then how I've done that is I've used these paths that I've already drawn. There's karate suit shadows, look. It's kind of like paint by numbers really. And then you would take that path, let's just turn that off so you can see it better. You would select that in here by rolling over this, which is load path as selection, like that. That is now an active selection, and we can hide that, and we can hit B on the keyboard for brush. Make sure that shading is active, otherwise we can't use the brush. Right bracket key like this, and then Command H will hide those. And then basically you've got, that's a hard mask look, so that's without any feathering. So if we undo that, and let's show the path, we would then go to Select, Modify, and Feather, which has a shortcut of Shift F6, and that will bring up the feather selection. And for feathering on this size of image at this resolution, a feather to soft those edges of 8 is very good. And then what will happen then, if I Command H and hide this, you'll see that that's got a nice soft edge now. And basically we can paint in there as if it's a stencil mask that you would airbrush through. So Command 0 fit in window. Without further ado, there we are for karate suit, and in true Blue Peter style, here's one I prepared earlier. So I'm going to show you in the next section how we painted all this shading in here for the jacket so it looks nice and real. And just so you can see, there's the shading off, there's the shading on, and you can even control the opacity of that if you need it a little bit lighter. So let's move on to some painting of karate jacket, shall we?